Tell me about your first friend you made at NYU Shanghai.
First friend? Oh, Zoe is the very first friend that impresses me because I have like an upperclassman who's from my high school. So Zoe was actually her roommate. So at the very first day I arrived at Shanghai, so I went to her room. Like that was the very first thing I do, and I met Zoe there.
I would say Roberto was probably the first, and that was when, like in the standard sort of freshman year welcome week rite of passage, we all went out to a bar in Shanghai. The drinking age there is 18, so everything's copacetic.
Mira, she was my former roommate.
Lindsay's great. Lindsay's my roommate. She was my roommate from freshman year. So every freshman gets roomed with a Chinese person at NYU Shanghai for at least their first year, and then they can change if they want to change in their second year.
Didn't really drink. I still don't really drink, and I was not really in my element. And when I'm nervous, I make jokes. And I was doing that where I was just nervously making jokes, and people were laughing at them because, you know, people who are drunk laugh. But I wasn't super comfortable, even though I was like making people laugh, and everyone was just, it still seemed like people were just sort of laughing at me and not necessarily with me.
I really enjoy talking to her because she's a good listener and she's really responsive.
There was this one kid from, I guess it was Argentina, that was not only like laughing with me but making jokes and like actually trying to make me comfortable, whereas that was really nice.
Went all around Spain, like it was amazing. So we were travel buddies, we were foodies, so we like go to all these restaurants and eat food.
The reason he said he hung out with me so much that night was because he thought I was gay, so I wasn't a threat. But that sort of Machiavellianism aside, and the fact that we could just not know anything about each other but just start riffs about other people in the bar was like a really cool thing, and we've been fast friends ever since.
First time I met Mira, I was in the dorm and I was putting up a poster onto the wall. It's a poster of a Japanese animation, and Mira came in. She said, "Oh wait, this is my favorite character." I was like, "What?" I always think that Chinese kids will like Japanese animations. I don't think that it's so popular like all over the world.
There's like this whole mismatch with like the Chinese community in NYU Shanghai and then the international community, so it's kind of hard to be friends across.
At a school where it's designed where you're bringing in people from like the most diverse parts of the world, and you're bringing in people with such incredibly different backgrounds, you're naturally going to have just divisions in those categories.
For like an outsider, it's kind of like, oh yeah, like how do I be friends with them, and like how do I connect with these Chinese students? But then like I think like Linz was like my way in.
I think that it's not uniform, and it's not something that you can say like, oh well, it's this entire group of people versus this entire group of people.
Chinese students tend to hang out more with Chinese students, and also Chinese students, they have like small groups by themselves. Like you can tell those four people, they're really close and they're like small group.
Actually, one of the most stark and like the one that's brought up the most is like the division between the Chinese students and the international students.
I don't know, probably because English is not the first language, and if you want to hang out with your friends, if you want to be totally relaxed, we prefer to speak Chinese probably. So that's why like being with Chinese students, like we can speak Chinese and we can like express ourselves like more comfortably.
Language barriers and convenience. I speak English first, and I would prefer to have my conversations in English. Some Chinese students speak Chinese as their first language, and if they're hanging out with people, they'd like to speak Chinese, which is like an entirely understandable thing. And then you also have like just the sort of cliques that form, but that's at any sort of social level.
And then I was in that bus and I was looking around trying to figure out what people were talking about, like trying to see if they're like hand gestures, I could like their facial expressions, I could see what they were talking about, but like it was just like I just didn't know what was happening and I was just lost. I don't think I've ever felt that lost.
Struggling to adapt to the course load and just like the intensity of the workload. Language that I'd prided myself on for my entire life. It was the differentiator that I had. I mean, obviously it doesn't differentiate me from the 1.4 billion people that speak it, but it was the differentiator that I had a lot of times throughout high school and in college applications and even in job applications now.
It was so bad. Like I don't know, it's just I used to study a lot, but then I used to go to exams and get an 86 or 87, and that would be a B minus because of a curve, and some student who got 110 with the extra bonus question.
As a non-native speaker, writing like those long essays can be really painful for me. Like especially we don't have any like relative experience like doing those kind of academic writing back at high school.
Like for students in top Chinese universities like Fudan and Tsinghua, we study nearly the same thing, and they kind of learn more because NYU Shanghai doesn't require us to learn Marxism in a deep level.
Because NYU Shanghai is like pretty young and like it was established, like the building was like built in 2012. We're not certain about like the future. We don't even have like a class graduated like when we got into like when we like made our decision to go to NYU Shanghai. So I think it's the uncertainty is the hardest, like is the most difficult part going to NYU Shanghai.
Like the first class that graduated and us, like we're the biggest risk takers. We had no idea what we were getting into. I can't speak for the Chinese kids, but it must be like something like a crazy idea for them as well to go to NYU Shanghai instead of going to like Jiaotong or like the Beida, like the best universities in China.
My target is Zhejiang University and Fudan University, also Tsinghua. These three has the best chemistry major. And then just like I went to the admitted student weekend of NYU Shanghai, and I feel like this idea is kind of amazing.
We've got like 1,000 people, which is not a lot for a school. Like that's way smaller than my high school, but from all over the world and from not just like geographically the most diverse places possible, but like from the craziest backgrounds, from the craziest like lived experiences and with the craziest aspirations.
Maybe chemistry is not my whole life. Maybe I want to do some liberal studies. I want to know more about the whole world.
These things at NYU Shanghai that you need to like juggle. There are these things like with social life, there are things with academics, there are things with just trying to explore the city, and
a lot of push to like have a shared Shanghai identity, and I don't know if sort of artificially forcing that is the right move. What I do think is like important to emphasize though is what I brought up earlier, which is just that the idea that we can all sort of revel in the fact that we know that everyone at NYU Shanghai was willing to do things and has aspirations that they're willing to go to lengths that 99% of people on earth would never go to.
Go to school in China, it just shows something already. Like it just shows that they're courageous, they're brave, they're like not afraid to take risks.
The common part is like they're willing to take risk and they want some kind of adventure.
Shanghai, especially like the foreigners who come to NYU Shanghai, their biggest thing is culture shock because a lot of them, they haven't left home and they come all the way like to China, which is like completely different from every other place that you've ever been to.
Go halfway around the world, having anything to sort of hold on to and like keep you grounded, even if it's just some dude that you made jokes with in Chinese class, really, really helps.
For me, I don't really get what's the culture, what's the American culture. Us Chinese students, we want to know. We really would like to know about the the U.S. culture. What kind of words does real American use in their daily life? Please explain to Chinese students why you are playing this, why it's funny, because it took me so long to figure out why it is funny. Yeah, kind of encounter with those who only want to practice their Chinese. So this is kind of I would say this environment is kind of encouraging. I would say it's encouraging both student body to use the language they are not familiar with, but also it it discourage people to to know more about the other culture, about for you to know about Chinese culture. But while we are telling you all this culture, would you please in exchange tell me more about your culture? I feel like we are get in touch with more international students, learn about their opinions. You may not like all of them, you may not like the game of the humanity game.
It's hard to get to humanity.
Yeah. You will give some insight from them, and you will make friends with some of them, not all of them if you don't like all their opinions, but you try to make friends with some of the international students and see how the world is big outside China.